Welcome to Podnutz, episode 19. Today's guest is Carey Holzman from Computer America. Computer America is America's longest-running, nationally syndicated radio talk show about computers. You can catch it 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Pacific Time on Lifestyle Talk Radio Network or the Business Talk Radio Network. Or you can go to computeramerica.com and download the podcast. Okay, we're here with Carey Holzman from Computer America. Thanks for joining us again, Carey.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
No problem. I remember the first time you were in episode 6 of Podnutz, and the first time we talked, you had a lot to say, and I feel like we could have went for maybe another hour or so. Even though we did go for a long time, but still, I feel we could have went for a little longer. So I figured it'd be a good idea to have you back, and if anything we missed or anything else new that has arisen, we could go over that.
Great.
Between that time and now, anything new that you've noticed or want to talk about?
Well, I think, I'm a big proponent, a big fan of free software, and it's important when you're using the free software, or, even if the software's not free, but you always want to be using the latest versions for the advantages that the latest versions bring, usually better performance, more compatibility, et cetera, et cetera. For example, drivers on the computer, the chipset drivers. VIA has constantly been updating their chipset drivers. They're now in version 5.18a. So if you've got a motherboard with a VIA chipset, you should go to viaarena.com and download those VIA chipset drivers and install them. If you don't know which drivers you need, you can go to a free website called driveragent.com, and you can do a free scan. Now, they want like $30 a year, I think, to download the drivers, but, if you're a clever enough person, you can say, oh, look, my ATI video card has an updated driver. Go to ATI.com, get the latest driver, and install it. You don't have to pay Driver Agent, to get the driver. It just makes it a little more convenient.
Sure.
But then after you've updated your drivers, again, it'll cost you nothing. Just rescan it again with Driver Agent. It should update and say that driver's up to date now. Not every driver that Driver Agent says is newer necessarily needs to be replaced. For example, you may not need to replace a sound card driver. There may be no advantage to that. You may not need to replace a driver for a mouse or a keyboard. I generally stick to chipsets, the controllers for the hard drives, the video cards. Those are the main ones for your system. You may even see updated USB drivers. Not really that important. And it gets a little hairy sometimes when you go to update drivers. Like on an Intel motherboard, it may say there's new drivers available and point you to Intel's INF installation package, which is an exe file. And when you go to install it, it may do nothing. And you go back and it shows that no driver's been updated. And then what you have to do in that case is you have to actually go through each item manually in the device manager, click update, click look here for the driver, and then point it to that file. But you actually have to expand that file. First, you have to use a utility like 7zip.com. 7zip is one that 7zip.com that will open that exe file up and extract its contents into a subdirectory, and then go ahead and point the device manager to that. And then you'll see your driver's update. And I don't know why Intel does this, but it falsely gives you the impression that it updated your drivers when it did nothing. And I can't really tell you what the difference is going from, say, version 6 of the driver to version 9 of the chipset driver, but I get a warm, fuzzy feeling when I hit Driver Agent, and it doesn't give me that red X anymore, and it says everything's up to date.
So the red X, as I was going to ask you, should somebody, if their computer's running fine, no problems, still update the drivers, like the chipset drivers?
I do all the time, absolutely. Okay. The customer brings me a computer, that's part of what I do to it. I update those drivers. Now, I wouldn't do it if I thought it was going to hurt their computer. Obviously, my time is worth money, and I don't want to sit there spending hours and hours trying to remove a driver. If you're familiar with drivers and you're comfortable doing it, the only trick is making sure you're getting the right one. So if you've got an ATI video card or an NVIDIA video card, it's important you know which model video card you have. You could often just go in your device manager and it should tell you right in there what it is. Then go to the NVIDIA or the ATI website and grab that driver, download it, and install it. Just do one at a time. Don't update 6 drivers and reboot. Update one driver, reboot. And if you have a problem with the driver, you know what was the last one you installed.
Right.
And then go back to driver agent again and scan and see that it says that driver is now updated. If it says it's updated, fantastic. Move to the next one. If you see a driver for a network card or a modem, it's up to you if you want to update it. I mean, again, I haven't noticed anything different. I've seen some network cards operate worse after I've updated the driver. It doesn't happen very often, but it can happen where, I had one client say that their networking got really, really slow. You'd click on it, you'd have to wait. There'd be this enormous pause before the directory would appear. And it turned out it was that updated driver. I had to roll back to the old driver, and everything was fine. So, on the network cards, modems, sound cards, take them or leave them. That's up to you. The important ones, video card, motherboard chipset, and hard drive controllers. Those are the most important ones that need to be updated.
It's like preventive maintenance, I guess, because not a lot of people think about, once the driver's installed, they don't even think about updating, I think, for the most part. So it's it's a good tip. It's preventive.
Well, that's what I'm all about. I'm all about preventive maintenance, and even updating to the latest BIOS. And I'm not a fan of doing that very often, but if you have an Intel motherboard, they've made it so easy. Intel's got something called an Express BIOS. So if you just type in your motherboard name, so let's say you've got an Intel D945 PVS motherboard. So you just type in Intel D945 PVS BIOS download in Google and look at the results, and you'll see one from the official Intel website. Click on that, and Intel offers you 4 different types of BIOS downloads. Grab the Express BIOS. It's a very small file. You double-click it. It says, I need to reboot Windows. You say, okay. It reboots, flashes the BIOS, and then boots back into Windows again. You're done. Now you've got the latest BIOS with all the latest fixes. And Intel makes that so easy. Now, it gets a little bit more complicated if you've got another brand board. Now, some of these manufacturers, like Gigabyte or MSI, have something called Live Update, where you can update the BIOS using a utility in Windows. But I very rarely have any luck getting it to communicate with their servers. So what I usually end up doing is typing the motherboard model name into, let's say it's a Gigabyte board. I go to gigabyte.com.tw, whatever their website is. Go to the support, go to downloads, type in the motherboard model number, and sometimes they have different revisions of the board. They'll say, well, do you have this version or that version or this version or that version? Well, I'm not going to open the case and check. All I need to do is look at what my current version is and see which model also has that same version, because different models share the same BIOS and other models have their own unique BIOS. And the way you can tell is by the BIOS version number. So one BIOS, for example, may be A15 and another BIOS may be F5. Right. And if your BIOS is currently F3, guess what you need to download? You need to download the F5 one, because it follows that you had F3, right. You missed F4, now F5 is available. Now, how can you determine what your motherboard model is?